Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
There we go.
There it is.
That's the kickoff. Thomas Clements, welcome back to the podcast, buddy.
Well, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a little over a year. You were on the show when the Seek One boys were up, and you were doing some magical camera work.
Yeah, learning how the people hunt up here in PA.
Yeah, it's a little bit different.
It's cool though, super cool.
Yeah, no, it was fun to bring all of you guys up here to see it, Lee and Drew and yourself, and just get to kind of experience something a little bit different. Is it quite a bit different from Georgia where you grew up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say honestly the culture, like the hunting culture, is pretty similar, if not bigger, up here. Mm-hmm. You know, but the style of hunting is a lot different. It's a lot bigger timber. We hunt a lot of pastures back home. Cow pastures are big, at least where I'm from.
Yeah.
And down south, it's all pasture ground. But the big timber stuff is a lot harder to figure out. I'm learning, you know, just because there's so much more room and places for the deer to go, and you got to know terrain a lot more. So there's a lot more to it up here, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely different. But one thing that I admire, I'm sure, like with all the pastures, turkey hunting, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it definitely used to be. There's really, Georgia's hurting for turkeys real bad now, and so you don't see that many in the cow pastures, not like they used to. But yeah, it is where you get to hunt a lot of them. But
yeah, there was some ground that I hunted when I was younger that had a cow pasture on it, and I remember killing a bird out of it. I didn't shoot him in the cow pasture. We saw him out there. It was right around noon, and and it was on Memorial Day, so it was super late. And it was like I don't remember if that was the last day of our season or the day before last day, something around there. But anyways, I was with my dad, and I think I was home from college or something, and saw which way the turkey was heading, so we went to the timber and ran down to the other side and set up and just did a little bit of calling, and he came in and real nice and close. But that's what I remember from hunting some pasture ground, but sounds like there's quite a bit of it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's definitely, like a lot of the public land, the majority of it's timber. So the one bird I have killed on public land was in timber for the most part, and then they'll have little cutout food plots from the management will do and stuff like that, and that's where he was. But no, I'd say it's a big. Well, if you go up north, like the northern part of the state, it's all timber with small cattle farms and dairies mixed in. But there's a bunch of turkeys up in them hills, and the deer hunting's probably more similar to this, up there, which I haven't done any of that. So,
well, yeah, I've heard that with both Alabama and Georgia, that especially some of the northern parts of the states are very similar to what it looks like here in Pennsylvania and other parts of kind of the Appalachian Mountains. Mm-hmm. Do you say Appalachian or Appalachian?
Appalachian.
Oh, you do? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. We're on the same team.
Yeah, I don't say Appalachian.
Yeah, Appalachian.
Yeah,
that's
Appalachian. Yeah.
No. The Timber Ninja guys give me a hard time for that every time. They're like,
really?
You're saying it wrong. It's like, it's Appalachian. I'm like, no, it's Appalachian.
That's Appalachian.
Sound it out.
Yeah, you know? That's what it looks like to me.
But anyway, so Thomas, you've been hanging out with me here for the last 3 days now, I guess.
Yeah.
So Thomas is, how would you describe what your, I guess, job title or business is? How would you describe it? Because you do a lot of things in the production realm.
Yeah, I mean, just freelance creative at this point. I mean, I have my own production company, but from the film producing, whether it's TV shows or YouTube shows or the commercial work too, and then the photo side of it. So it's just kind of a hodgepodge of it all.
Yeah, and and also now getting into voice stuff too. As
Mm-hmm.
we talked about it a year ago when I originally started planning it, but now we're going to make it happen where there'll be a new intro to the podcast, and it's going to be Thomas's voice because you have the voice of an angel, man. I didn't know how to say that in a straight way, but
I enjoy it. Like I don't know, it's cool. Like I grew up around a ton of farmers because that's what my dad was in, and listening to the way they talked and stuff. And we watched a bunch of westerns growing up too, and so like John Wayne was my favorite, and Bonanza, and you listen to all.
Oh, Bonanza!
Yeah, Bonanza was a good one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was just something. It was just cool, and I wanted to be like them. So doing the voice stuff is. You get to add a little more stuff to videos. Sometimes it's a little corny. Sometimes it's cool and it fits, and you just figure it out. But
yeah, no, I think that's really cool. And man, I should have had you do the intro to this one. I messed it up.
I don't know if I could do it on the spot though. I got to be.
You did it on the one with Lee and Drew and those guys, but. No, I think that's a really cool aspect of it. So Thomas has been out here doing some work for CVA and doing some product stuff, some videos, some different things along those lines. So there'll be some new stuff coming out from them that I got to test this year and be able to utilize. So I'm not sure. I think it'll be out by the time this comes out, but I don't want to say it in case. But you can go over to CVA's website and check that out, and I'm sure I'll. With the podcast ad, I'll update that for whenever that new stuff drops. But anyways, it's been pretty cool to see how you work and kind of your flow and the creative aspect of making high production, whether it's commercials or just, doing some following me around scouting, doing some videos along that line, and everyone that I've worked with has like a different way of how they think about it and how their eye sees things, and it's pretty neat to see.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had, like, I've shot around several people, but I'd have to agree, like, everybody's got a different way. Like, when I first started doing it, you kind of think there's one way to do things and it's the right way, and so you try to study everybody and learn on YouTube and stuff like that, and you kind of figure out that the guys who are really good at it and have the best eye, it's really just a hodgepodge of things. Like, they just kind of wing it most of the time and let their eye tell them what to do, and they're not, like, I don't know. It's the same way with any kind of business. There's not one way to do it.
There's not an exact rule.
Yeah, there's a million ways to do the skin a cat. So it's kind of that same way, and you just kind of figure out what works and what you like, and you get an eye for it sometimes, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes you got to kind of correct things, but.
Yeah, I think so. I thought about this the other day about as far as like you can learn skills on a camera, and you can learn like how to operate the camera differently, adjust lighting and do that. But like as far as that creative eye for whether it's taking photos or videos or having an idea how a clip is going to pull together, I think it's half just a person and their ability and their trained, as far as how do I want to put this? Just kind of what they were born with. And then part of it, I think you can, whether it's inspiration from other people or learning to be able to kind of grow that creative mind of it. So I think it's kind of a combination, because I do believe you can learn just about anything. But there's also, if you look at athletes, there's naturally athletic people that have a little bit of a head start with it. And I feel like you have that creative eye already, so that helped with the way that you do your business and roll things out.
No, I appreciate that. It means a lot when people enjoy your work, and I think it's important. Like, if you want to make art, whether it's painting or whether it's video, whether it's music, whatever, I think it's important to make it for you first, because it needs to be like, you need to be proud of it, regardless if anyone likes it or not. But obviously, it reinforces that you got something good when people do appreciate it, they do like it, and it, when you're doing it for a business, then you have to be aware, like, it has to do well for people, for it to be valuable to brands, to shows. Excuse me, but Man, that beer's got some fizz in it. But no, it's. I do think there's some natural to it, but anybody can learn how to run a camera, and it doesn't. Like, I think there's a big stigma about, like, oh, I'm not good with electronics, or I'm not good with buttons. Well, I'm not either, and I'm not a tech savvy guy. I don't get in the weeds on learn. I just learn what I need to know to get it done.
Yeah.
And as far as filming, hunting, and stuff like that, like, if you just take the short amount of time and actually study it, like, YouTube will teach you anything you need to know and make it pretty easy to film stuff. But you know, if you want to stick with it, you got to love the art side of it.
Yeah.
And be looking for that. So,
yeah. And exactly what you said, though, like, there are so many resources out there now. I mean, even like there is with hunting, with being able to fix your dryer, like, you know, anything that you want to learn is available really on the internet, but you have to apply yourself to be able to do it and gain those repetitions to be able to do that. And we were talking about it. So while Thomas is here, he came in, so he's coming from Georgia. You got, well, you were on a different shoot in Missouri, but you came from there, and we got a big snowstorm, so you got delayed a little bit. And then it's been extremely, extremely cold. And we were talking about, you know, you still had your cameras clipped onto the outside of your pack. You have those Peak Design clips. If no one has seen those, they're pretty cool, or they clip right onto your pack to keep them secure. One little button, you can pop them out. But keeping your camera on you in a way that you can grab it and shoot something quickly is, you know, we were talking about it as far as if your camera's in your pack, it's not doing you any good.
No. And then, like, you almost got to force yourself. Like, if you want to, it's like learning any skill. If you want to learn it, you got to force yourself to do it, because it's the repetition, like you said.
Yeah.
Whether it's hunting, whether it's scouting, whether it's working on a truck, you got to just do it over and over again, and then it becomes muscle memory, and it becomes habit. And that's why, like, you just have to, every time you go out, you got to take the camera with you, or you got to keep shooting something. If you have an idea, even if you're not getting paid for it, you got to shoot it. You got to edit it. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost, is the editing part of it, because it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to sit at a computer and try to figure things out, and the softwares don't exactly teach you how to do it, and you got to flip back and forth between YouTube and forums and getting on the phone with people and trying to figure out, you know, why this doesn't work or whatever. But the editing side is what makes it where you can think out a storyline, because the more you edit, the more you understand how things have to go to tell the story the way it needs to be told. So then when you go into a shoot and you say, okay, we want to do a shoot about a pair of binos that helps you scout, or that are being released, and we want to do a video on scouting, you know. Well, then you start running through the ideas of, like, okay, well, you know, how are we going to use these tight shots, and then what is in the sequence, and then how is the music going to play in the background, and what kind of dialogue do we want to have to go with it. And it all just kind of crashes together in your head, but somehow it makes sense when you start thinking it out, and you just take it one shot at a time. And a lot of times, if you just get like 4 or 5 shots lined up, you get in the middle of those, and then you'll get another one coming in, an idea, and it just kind of feeds off each other. And I don't know, that's what we were doing the last 3 days, and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it was fun bouncing ideas back and forth and kind of working through that stuff. And that was something that I feel like I've been doing it for a while now, but not as much from the commercial side, as far as, like, you know, CVAs using this stuff for some of their advertising. A lot of the stuff I was doing before was, you know, either from my own stuff or to help a company that would be a sponsor or anything of the show, but it wasn't for them to use commercially. And that's a different level, and adds some stress to it too, because you know, whatever your work is representing this brand and how they're doing it, and making sure that is that story of whether it's I don't know if the word commercial is right, but like that video or that piece of content is telling the story that you want it to tell in an authentic way, and that as you as a viewer or a listener is understanding what is trying to be told there without sometimes being said, just through that picture.
Yeah. And that's what's cool about this one. Well, the best thing was, like, you've been in it and you have a creative eye and ear yourself, and like you consume you're immersed in all of this, and you're ate up with hunting. So when you're shooting with somebody who not only is ate up with it and loves to consume information and knowledge about all of it, then it kind of like, okay, from a creative standpoint, we'll have an idea, and then I would ask you, like, okay, how would you naturally do this? How would this play out in your mind and what you do? And then we can kind of bounce ideas off each other, and then find something that's realistic but also super cool to watch, and it would play out really well and evoke the emotion that you want and help build the brand. And that was really cool with the project. The CVA was, they were like, we have this brand plan, and this is what we're trying to build, and we want people to relate to us, and we want people to build trust in what we have and who we are. And it's kind of, they trusted you because you have a similar brand and you align in the values and all that. And it was kind of like, okay, well, let's just mash the two together and create something that puts people in the same emotional state of like getting ready for hunt season and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool just to see where it went with not a ton of planning.
Yeah, and on that point, like you think if someone's on the outside, whether you're listening or you're watching this, you think like, okay, these shows, and whether it's a YouTube show or a podcast or whatever, it's like, oh, they're just gonna, they just take sponsors on whoever's gonna pay. But the way that I feel like both you and I work, and it sounds like with even like when you're taking client work and you want to work with a specific company, the way that they align with you as a person or as your business is super important to me. Like, and CVA was one of those companies that, from talking to them right away, was like, this fits. And like when when I was talking with them on the phone about like how much deer camp means to me and that aspect of it, and seeing them like light up and be like, that's exactly what we're looking for, and that's what. Well, we agree with the same things, and it was like, man, that's something that lines up. Now, obviously, the product's got to be good too to be able to line up. Yeah. But the brand and who they are is just as important, if not more, at times.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree 100%, and that's what makes it a good partnership.
Yeah, most definitely. But it's been cool to see that, and when you were saying about like how we were brainstorming back and forth, I don't know if you knew this, Thomas, but in a past life, or I guess when I was younger, I should just say that I was super into drawing.
Really?
So there's some pictures at camp. I don't know if you saw them drawn on the walls.
I saw the buck,
the Rompola buck.
Yeah.
The most controversial buck
the one
ever.
That's like this wide.
Yeah. And so like when I used to draw pictures out of magazines. My grandpa would have North American whitetail. My grandpa could draw, and that's how I learned from him. And I'd go over there and draw, which ended up turning into wood carving. He carved a bunch of gun cabinets and clocks and mirrors and all this stuff. And I got into doing that in college, and that was how I'd make some extra money, is I'd build gun cabinets and carve all of the front doors and build elk scenes and like deer and all of this different stuff. And then I would sell it for cash and make money by doing that. And I haven't done it in years because honestly, it was one of those things that I loved doing. But when I realized when I was doing it for work, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of stopped doing it. I still draw every once in a while. And like the deer camp logo that's on my hat, I drew that. And then Jordan Riley turned it into what it is as a logo. But like I drew the initial concept up of like what our deer camp's like when someone pulls in with a buck in the back of the truck, the tailgate down, the camp sitting there in the front porch, and like that's how that's
too cool. I didn't know that at all.
So like I've always had like a little bit of that creative side, and back when I used to do when I used to be big into riding BMX and stuff, I had a camera and I'd film it all, and I'd make DVDs of me and my buddies and stuff. And so I got into it at an early age as far as like really loving that side of things, and that kind of progressed from the hunting side. And the hunting side was just that I've done it my whole life, and the doing the scouting videos and all that stuff, it was more of me learning how to talk with a camera and how to explain things in a way that people could understand of what I was trying to say or do. But the actual doing of the thing, wasn't hard for me because it's just what I do all the
Yeah.
time, so it just made sense. But
Shoot, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And it makes a little more sense now to me because, sometimes you'll shoot with people and they ain't got an Archie bone in them.
yeah,
And then there's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't, those wires aren't connected, but it did for you. And like when I would say, this is what I kind of see the shot list doing, and you'd kind of add on to it, or you'd have a shot idea of your own, and it 9 times out of 10 it lined up, and I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah,
And so that's what made it a lot of fun shooting wise.
Yeah.
And you got to give your own 2 cents, and we just kind of did it together, which was a lot of fun for me.
yeah. No, yeah, like I said, it's a lot of work doing this kind of stuff. Like the filming part of it is not. I mean, that's a big part of it, but the planning aspect is underrated from
It is.
the standpoint. How many we spent hours in my kitchen.
I mean, I'd say it was, I don't know, 40, 60
Yeah,
planning, just trying to figure out how the concept should look. Like, what are people going to relate to? Is this going to be corny, or is this going to have the right vibe? Is this something that's natural too? Like, is this in your wheelhouse? Is this things that actually happen and that we do? And does it make sense for the project? It takes a lot of time, and you were very much right about it, and have more experience in it, even planning podcasts and planning the articles that you used to write and stuff like that. Like, it's just, that's a lot of the work that never gets seen.
yeah,
And even me, in my short time doing this, the last 3 years, it's been a huge learning curve just seeing all that behind the scenes work too.
yeah, yeah, and that's where it comes down to what you said earlier. You got to love it and want to do it because it is a lot of work, and it seems as if it's like I feel like every kid growing up that loves to hunt is like, I want to film hunts for a living.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it than just that.
It's like, or even not even filming, but just, even doing what you do. Like, you have to go out all the time. Mm-hmm. And it gets monotonous. And, like, you really got to love it.
Yeah.
And you got to love telling people about it. That's a whole nother ball game. Not just doing it. You got to tell people about it. You got to capture it. Self-filming is horribly hard. And frustrating.
I hate it.
Yeah, no, it'll ruin some hunts.
Yeah,
and I don't know, man. And some people like, how do you film and you don't ever get to shoot, And I'm like, that doesn't bother me. Like, I just like being there.
Yeah,
and like you get to be a part of it. You're watching their back. A lot of times you're on the back of the tree or you're behind there over their shoulder, and I'm watching through the monitor. But I'm also like, if there's a doe they don't see. If there's a cow elk coming around the corner they don't see and stuff like that, like you're there too, and that's what gets me going.
So, Thomas, if you had to, like, if someone, and I know there's a lot of people that are, but if you had to speak to somebody that was interested in like what you do and how you do it, like what is something that you see that people either look at it the wrong way or have the wrong perspective, and what piece of advice could you give to them to help them want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think there's a pie in the sky, or it's all roses and sunshine outlook on it sometimes, of like, oh, you get to travel for a living, and people pay you to come hunting with them, and all you got to do is carry a camera, and that's like there's a lot more to it than that. And you spend a ton of time, countless hours on a computer editing, and that is monotonous and boring, and people, I had a horrible time in high school sitting still in college. It was, I don't know how I ended up in a career that I sit at a computer for a substantial amount of time. But I like it. I like the building part of editing. But I think there's also, to say there's a pie in the sky and that it's kind of over-glorified by some people. But for those that want to get into it, it's not a huge barrier to entry if you're willing to put in the work. Like, there's literally everything that I've learned has either come from YouTube or from other people. Like, I didn't go to school for it. I didn't really know I wanted to do it till I got out of college. And, you can learn, you can fast track the learning if you're willing to pay or have the money to pay for classes. But if not, literally everything that you could ever want to learn is on YouTube. And if you want to fast track it, you learn the basics on YouTube, and then you find a mentor, somebody who's above where you want to be or near above where you are currently, and then just work for them and figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's what fast tracked a lot of my stuff, was just working around people that were way ahead of me for less money, but enough to pay my bills and free at times, doing work for free. But there's plenty of work to be done, and there's actually a big shortage of people who can edit and shoot. So if you want to stand out and you want a spot at the table, figure out how to edit. You make yourself very valuable.
Yeah, that's the less sexy part of doing it. But one thing I've noticed, like with you, is I saw it when you were up here in PA with Seek One and doing that, and I saw it when we were down in Alabama, when we were doing the long range hunting course down there, and then I saw it here. Last night I'm like, hey Thomas, I'm gonna go to bed. You're still on your computer, going through, making sure you had the assets, the photos that you thought you had, making sure that everything was done right in case something had to be redone, and all of these different things. Like there's that part of it that's not normally seen, and I don't think you're trying to, and I'm not trying to say like it's terrible, because it's not. Obviously we love doing the things that we do, but it needs to be, it can't be just over like glamorous or however you want to making it look like it's this just beautiful thing all the time, because it's it does, when it comes down to it, is a job, and there are things that need to be done and need to be done in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think you need to go into it with a realistic outlook of like, it is work and you want to love what you're doing, but you also need to take it very seriously, because it's like there's shots, you can't mess it up. And you can't bump deer. And that's one thing people don't understand too, is like, you might be being paid to be there, but you best not ruin that hunt.
Yeah.
Just be a fly on the wall, be there but don't be there type deal. And you got to be a real good people person too, because you're gonna run into all different kinds of people all over the country or world even. And you got to learn how to get along with all different kinds of people. Because one thing I learned early on, one of my good buddies told me, is like, you don't have to be the best shooter in the world, but if you're fun to be around and you're good and you clean up after yourself and you carry your own weight and then some, you'll get called back.
Yeah.
There's people like, they'll get by with a mediocre camera guy and even editor if you're hardworking and just good to be around. Because it's like, creative people, we can be weird. Just plain and simple. And so having those people skills too, and that's part of your upbringing, your family and your mom and dad teach you how to have manners and stuff like that. But it's you gotta really love it and enjoy it. And it's fun. What makes it the most fun for me is just the people that I get to meet. It's like coming out and hanging out with you. Like, we did work really hard on this shoot, but we also just hung out, and got to do some fun things when we weren't shooting. And we jive because we have the same values and the same interests and stuff like that. And that's what those relationships and that you get to build and stuff like that does it for me.
Yeah, you got to spend a couple hours over there with my dad last night.
That was cool.
And yeah, he was smiling ear to ear, telling stories and showing you sheds and going through, and
that dude's something else. Yeah. He's a mountain man for sure.
Yeah. It's super cool, and to, like you said, like before I got into this, I wouldn't, who would have thought that I'd be, hanging out, having a couple beers and talking with, a guy from Georgia. It's just like being in a small town and growing up. It's just like that's another world. That's a whole different world, where now that world has become smaller in a way for me with these opportunities. Yeah,
and that's something super cool that just a part of being in the media world, not even necessarily whether it's cameras or editing or music but podcasting. It's like you literally are telling stories and getting to hear stories. Like it made my whole trip getting to sit down there with your dad for 2 hours, because you can just hear and feel the joy of every story he tells and every shed that he picked up. Out of the 1,000 of them that were down in that basement, every single one of them that he picked up, he could tell you how many times he had this buck on camera, how many times he saw it on the hoof, how many times it boogered him, you know, and then, you know, it's just cool, you know, and then that's what I think we get caught up in the quickness of consumption and media, and it's bad for me. Like I have to remove myself from stuff, because it robs me of a lot of joy, of a lot of focus, and the woods is such a place of presence. Like you got to be there, and your dad he don't have social media, he don't have, you know, he's removed from all that. And you hear the joy that he gets from all of those encounters. And it's like that is what it is. Yeah. If you just bottle that up and give it to everybody would leave their phone at home every time they went in the woods. You know, it's like he went hunting. It's the last day of the season today, and he's hunting a big buck. He didn't even text us the whole time. We're sitting here waiting for updates, and he don't even care. He's there. Yeah. You know, that's what's cool to me.
Yeah, I had to text him an hour and a half after dark and make sure, one, he got back.
Yeah.
And two, I'm like, well,
yeah.
3-0. But yeah, no, he's definitely ate up with it, and yeah, this is the first year in a long time that first time I can ever remember actually that he didn't shoot a Pennsylvania buck, and and I know that was eating at him, but man, he went until literally the bell rang.
Lack of effort.
No, he went literally till the bell rang, and was out there when it's single digit temperatures with the flintlock that may or may not go off.
Or if it does go off, it might take a few seconds to go off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And but anyways, talking about that with the consumption aspect of it, you and I had some lengthy conversations on this, both being in the media world and seeing, we are a part of producing hunting content that people consume. Mm-hmm. But there's this thing that goes back and forth, and we both in our minds of like, how good is that to do that? And we both agree it's a very good thing of having media, not really, I guess, talking poorly on that aspect of it, but how you portray those things and what we are putting out and how people are consuming it and what eyeballs are on them is super important. And you gotta constantly think about that. And it's, and sometimes there's not really easy answers to it. And sometimes there's not an answer that I can come up with, that you can come up with. Yeah. But I think it's important to have that discussion and think about those things.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree 100%. It's glamorous from the outside looking in of like, oh, you create podcasts around hunting for a living. You make videos about hunting for a living. You take photos of hunting for a living. And it's like, yeah, that small, tiny portion of what we do for work is very cool. But it's also a huge responsibility. And some people aren't even aware that it is a responsibility. And it's not dogging on anybody, but our awareness of, especially now, media is worldwide, and people who love hunting, people who hate hunting, and people who don't know anything about hunting, they all have access to our worlds now. And media is here. It's not going away. And so you can't sit on the sidelines and say, well, we just can't shoot anything about nothing, because it's just not, it's not realistic. People want to tell stories, and they want, and it should be. But I think you hit it on the head of like, there's not always a right or wrong answer on how to portray something or how to go about something. But when you carry yourself with knowing that it is your responsibility to be the ambassador for the resource, the animals, the land, the rights to hunt, and the way you hunt, like that, and how we portray it, that's what keeps those things alive. It keeps the resource there. It keeps the freedoms to hunt there. And it passes it on to the next generation on how to carry yourself in the woods, how to respect the animals, how to hunt ethically and morally. Like, there's ways to kill animals that isn't hunting, it's just killing. And it's, being authentic and showing things as they happen is sometimes hard to do, because there are gruesome things that happen in hunting that are bittersweet. We don't love to see it either, but it is what happens. And so, it's a hard row to hoe, so to speak.
Yeah, no, and like one of the things like that I struggle with is, okay, showing the bad parts of hunting, or the less, the parts that nobody wants to have, say wounding an animal. That's something that happens, and anything that's happened, I talk about it on the podcast, because I do believe that there are lessons to be learned from that, and that people can learn from my mistakes. They can understand it. I'm a human. Everyone makes mistakes. That kind of stuff happens, but you got to watch by being honest about that and sharing it in a world like social media, like Instagram, that doesn't, this podcast, I'd say probably 99.9% of the people that are listening are hunters.
Yeah.
So that, they get it already. They're already kind of on our side from that perspective. But when you look at a social media realm, you don't know who's going to get eyeballs on it, especially if you have a public profile and anybody can find that video and somehow it hits that explore page on Instagram, and anyone can see it. And if that story's not told right in that, or sometimes you might even have it written out in the caption, but that photo tells a different, gives that, whatever, it creates a reaction in somebody in a matter of seconds that they're already fuming. They're not looking at the rest of what's there. And the thing is, like, you can't, and this isn't like saying, shouldn't apologize at all for being a hunter. It's being aware of what you're doing. And this is definitely magnified on people like us, someone like me that's, in front of the camera, on, being out there in front of a lot more eyeballs than, say, the normal person that hunts. But even the normal person that hunts, the regular, Joe that has nothing to do with the hunting industry per se, needs to be aware of that.
Yep.
There's when you're posting on social media, and like, I'm a huge fan of trapping, and I believe there's a huge purpose for it, and I'm a huge fan of it. But sometimes the way people show that isn't helping the situation. Like, if we want to say, like, is it our God-given right to be able to do these things? Yeah, it should be. But there's the way things are, now, that's not really the case. And as far as that stuff can be taken away, we're seeing that in states like Colorado and Washington and Oregon and New Jersey and all these places that are chipping away. And I think, we're not helping ourselves. And I'm not trying to make this seem doom and gloom, but I think we have an opportunity to self-regulate ourselves and how we are sharing things and how we are doing that. And man, it's something that I constantly think about, and I've made mistakes for it before. Like, there was a video that I had posted last year or 2 years ago where Kurt had shot a turkey in Montana at like 65 yards. It was a long shot, and posted the video of it, and people jumped on us of like, that's not ethical to do that, and blah blah blah, and maybe and maybe it needs to be thought about. But at the same time, I did no, and in that 30-second clip did no justice to explain that my brother is a gunsmith. He shoots guns constantly. He knows where his gun shot. The turkey died instantly. There was no problems with that. It can happen at a closer distance, but nonetheless, the messaging wasn't the greatest on how that was put out and portrayed, and that was something I overlooked. And so, by saying this, is not saying I don't make those mistakes, but it's to think about that before you do these things, and the less amount of mistakes that we can make in that is going to help us.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the best way that you put it, the best way of just saying that it just comes down to self-regulation. And it's not doom and gloom. Like, we're all human and we're going to make mistakes, but operating with the awareness of, like, these things are not permanent. Our rights, I don't trust the government at all. I think you can pretty much just exclude them protecting your rights to hunt a deer. So, this is up to us. And so there's videos that only belong, there's pictures that only belong at hunting camp, because the people that are in that room understand what happened there. And, it's all the adrenaline, it's all the whatever. But the rest of the world doesn't necessarily need to see that. And it's not you being less of a man because you're not willing to post it on Instagram. It's you being more of a man or a woman because you're willing to say, no, I'm going to have more couth than that, and I'm going to refrain from posting these things on the internet because I know that it probably won't, but it could do damage to our image as hunters, and that's the whole world thinks that people just love to kill animals. But in reality, for the majority of them, and there's exceptions, but for the majority of hunters, nobody loves animals more than we do. And like you guys self-regulate up here for years when the doe populations were low. Like, you guys would only shoot one doe in an area a year. Mm-hmm. Not because you didn't have the opportunity to shoot more, but because you knew that, hey, this is on us. We're not being told by the state this is us. And it's no different when it comes to social media and even sending stuff to your friends. You and I grew up in a world where our grandpas and our dads taught us how to hunt, and when I was growing up, like, you weren't allowed to kill an animal unless you were going to eat it, kind of thing. And it was just those simple things that just taught you, like, life and death it's normal. That's life. And it's supposed to be that way. And we have stewardship over these animals. But it's a huge responsibility. Like, we get so passionate about chasing these animals and we love them so much. But it's also a huge responsibility to take care of them, too. And if we want the rights to hunt them, and if we want the ability to take care of them the way they should be, because we've seen in states like Oregon and California, when you take away that hunting, you watch in the next few years, the animals are going to suffer because they're not being looked after and the money's not there to manage them, and there's going to be unnecessary disease and stuff like that, and it just snowballs. And it just, like you said, there's no right or wrong, yes or no answer all the time. Sometimes it just takes some perspective of just thinking through things and how we present things, because the whole world is open to what we do now.
Yeah. And that was, for me, one of the biggest eye openers coming from a small town where everybody hunted. Mm-hmm. That it was normal that, if I killed a buck, I'd be going in with my pictures. I'd have them printed out, and I'd be taking them in my backpack, probably carrying them in my hand, showing people it, showing my teachers. Like, everybody was on the same page. But I was in that echo chamber. I didn't know what else is out there. And you can think, like, oh, well, the other people don't matter, but they do. The problem is we are the minority in the world at this point. And I think that, we have to be very cognizant of that and what we are doing and what we are sharing. And again, that's not apologizing for what we do. It's just trying to be cognizant of it. You're never going to change the mind of an anti-hunter. That's not what the goal is here. But there is just a ridiculous amount of people that fall in that middle that can be swayed in our direction when we need that vote. Or want to be able to sway things one way or another. And those are the people that we really want to, cater to and have them understand it and be able to see. And it's not that we want to make all those people hunters, but we want them to be able to understand it and say, oh, I understand why they do that. And I've had conversations with people. I've been in cities, I've been in bars and places like that, and they ask me, oh, what do you do for a living? Well, this is going to be a minute. We're going to have to, or where are you heading? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually on my way to Montana to go on a bear hunt. Well, that takes a little bit more explanation than that. And normally you have that conversation face to face and you can get to a pretty good place of being able to explain that versus a picture just showing up of a dead bear with blood all over the ground and whatever, and hooting and hollering. Again, we understand what that is, but there's more to that others don't understand from seeing that.
Yep, 100%. I mean, like seeing a picture of an animal with an arrow sticking out of it, and there's blood everywhere, and everybody's high fiving. Like, we know, for the most part, and most times, months of work went into killing that animal per se, and hours of stalking and failed attempts and whatnot. Like, more effort than the average person who doesn't hunt would be willing to do anything to acquire food, much less, whatever. But a picture doesn't show that. And even your description on the bottom of the picture, like you said, all it takes is the picture or the video, and it evokes the emotion regardless of how you explain the situation. So it's just a lot of times just taking the time to step back and say, hey, does this respect the animal, and does this respect our traditions as hunters? Like, as a whole, who we are, does this portray us in a good light? That's all it takes, and carrying yourselves at a higher level than maybe is necessary, so that you're teaching the next generation how to respect animals and how to portray things. Because for the most part, a lot of people just don't know any better because they don't have anybody to tell nothing, and they see videos that go viral on the internet, and it's, we're shooting ourselves in the foot there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And even from the example of, talking about protecting the resource. So even going past the photos and the videos, another thing we were having conversation with, over coffee and then a few beers later at night was, I struggle with the aspect. I love education. I wouldn't have the opportunities to go hunt where I hunt if I didn't learn that from somebody else that was willing to put that information out there.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about doing that, but I also go back and forth sometimes on like what is too much, where that I could potentially ruin that resource for people in the future. And there's a lot of things that are, in quotation, pieces of content that I would like to create because I think it would be helpful for people. But then I look and the negatives outweigh the positives, and I don't do it.
Yeah.
And I don't put it out there. And that's why you never, like, I hate when people always ask, oh, what part of the state are you hunting? Where?
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer those questions.
Yeah.
And it's not to be rude. It's because, one, I don't want to ruin my own experience, but even from a bigger standpoint, I don't want to blow up anybody else's spots or ruin that, for somebody else and reduce the experience that somebody could have in that space. For example, I was telling you some of the old scouting videos that I used to do on YouTube. I used to just pick a random place of public land and do the video to give an idea. It wasn't a place I went to or anything. It was just, that was an example. And I thought because it wasn't my spot that, it wouldn't be a big deal. Not thinking, and saying it out loud, it's like, yeah, Beau.
Yeah.
But like
in the moment.
That is somebody else's place that I'm highlighting and showing that. And it's like, so now, I try to find places that are private land that look similar to what I'm talking about, so I can still do the education part, but there's not a chance of, affecting someone's land or a place that they have in their experience to be able to enjoy the resources. And that's part of, me learning through it and trying to figure out where that line is. And I really don't think there's a rule book for it. It's kind of what you said of taking a step back and thinking about it. And a lot of times your gut kind of tells you what's right or wrong with that.
No, 100%. And it's something I've struggled with a lot. Like I may not be the talent or whatever that's on film, but I'm right there with it. And like my hands are helping create and tell these stories. And so I want to be able to hang my hat on what's being told, and what it's encouraging throughout the hunting industry and hunters as a whole. And like you said, like we have to be patient with ourselves to a degree because we are human and we don't know. There's no rule book on what to do and not do as media becomes more and more prevalent and hunting becomes more popular. you're going to make mistakes, and there's things that are going to happen. And that's what I don't like on the internet. Will just torch you and burn your house down if you make one mistake with no context to who you are as a person. And that's just the keyboard warriors, and there's not much you can do to it. But it does punch you in the gut when that happens.
Yeah.
But I think you're right of it's just carrying yourself of just stepping back and wanting to say, I'm going to do what's best for the resource. And that's just when it comes to, if you're going to hunt public land, even if you're hunting states, if you draw attention to certain things, you have to understand there's always going to be consequences to it, and it's not good or bad. That's just the way life is. And even back in the day when they wrote articles about things, and it was all magazines, there was no video, there was none of that. There were people up in arms about people writing articles about it because nobody ever knew that you could hunt in this state or that state and that there were deer there or whatever. So it's been around and will always be around, but I think it's how we carry ourselves in what we're doing that protects the resource and teaches people to carry themselves in the right way. And the respect of the resource is the most important thing. And whether it's public land or private land, it's that I think would weather longer than even if, you make a mistake or you don't know how to do something. That's going to fix it. And your gut, like you said, is going to teach you the right thing to do.
Exactly what you're saying about the resource and going back to the point of the unrealistic expectation that media is just going to go away and you can't. And I don't agree with that. And some of the people that say that that's the answer, because I don't think that is realistic. That's not would that solve it if there was a possibility of all that, going away? Maybe, but it's not a possibility.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a positive that can come from it and being able to be active. I mean, if you would have, because of social media and because of podcasts and videos and people talking about how important it is to be members of conservation organizations and people that are out there fighting for it, that's why I'm joined in all these organizations and spending money and donating 3% of all the apparel sales to a conservation organization every quarter. And I'm not sitting there, clapping my own hands here, but it's like, I wouldn't have been doing that if it wasn't for learning about that through media. Yeah. And going back as far as you can think, when media started with magazines, with those things, there was always things that happened that may, quote unquote, ruin an area for a time period. Yeah. Things usually come back around. Like things go in ebbs and flows, but there's always been that. Now it is a little bit easier. It doesn't, you don't have to have a subscription to a magazine. You can just go on YouTube and search, big bucks in Iowa. And it's like, okay, now I can find a whole lot of stuff there. But so I think even it's more important now to be, I guess, think about those things and understand how you're doing it. And again, it doesn't matter where you're at on the level of exposure. I mean, it does from the standpoint of, obviously someone like, the Seek One guys are going to have a bigger impact than, Joe Schmo. But at the same time, everybody should be thinking about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're very right on the fact that it doesn't matter if you got 10 followers or 20,000 followers. Like the algorithm doesn't care how many followers you got, and it doesn't matter per se if one person sees your post. Like, you got to think about it on the aspect of you are trying to teach people how to respect animals the way they should be respected. And if one person sees your display, whether it's post, video, or podcast or whatever, of your love for hunting and the way that you respect it and that kind of stuff, it's going to encourage the right behavior. Versus where if they see the wrong thing, and they don't know any better, that's one more person who's potentially hurting hunting as a whole because we just, because they don't know any better, not with malicious intent or anything like that. And then the other thing, like, people don't understand, like the Seek One guys, like, it's cool a lot of people think that it's super cool to have that kind of notoriety for killing big deer. But what they don't know is like that is an enormous responsibility that they carry every day with everything that they do and everywhere that they go, that people are watching them like a hawk. And they got to carry themselves a notch higher because of that.
Yeah.
And they got to do everything to a T because of that. And not everybody's cut out for that.
No, and I mean, I've had conversations with both Drew and Lee, but especially Lee, who is someone that does not take that lightly. And like, for anybody that doesn't know Lee and just sees him on camera, like Lee really, he knows what he's doing has an impact that could be positive or negative depending on how that's portrayed. And I really respect him for how much he thinks about it, to the point where it's detrimental to mental health sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And but it's not an easy thing to be able to do that. And and Lee's talked to me about some of those hard things and thinking about it. And again, I respect the hell out of him because I think he has really good intentions on what he's doing and how he's trying to portray those things. But it's not something that's very simple. Like, honestly, if I think in the media realm, and man, I hope Lee doesn't listen to this because I don't like to say anything positive about him to his face. But the fact that if there was more Lees out there, we'd be in a better spot from a media standpoint. Man, that hurt to say.
Oh yeah, I know. He won't listen to it though.
No, he won't. He will not.
No, I agree, man. It's as a whole, it's hard, and even him, he had a learning curve because he didn't grow up in a hunting background, so. I don't know. And like we say all this, not to be doom and gloom, because you can't go through life like it's inevitable. Like you said, it's not going away. This is the world we live in. Things progress. We talked about that earlier. You can't stop progression.
No.
And it's better to just have the right attitude about it of like, okay, I'm going to do what I can. And I'm going to rest my hat on the fact that I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to make mistakes. That's okay. But I'm going to do what I can to protect the resource and to protect our freedoms by behaving accordingly and trying to portray things in the right light. And that's, if everyone can conduct themselves that way and we can encourage each other to do the same, I think we'd be in a real good spot. Yeah.
And again, it comes down to what you said. With the way you portray yourself, whether it's social media, whether it's self-regulating with tags, we're talking about turkey tags and looking at, deer, whatever. And you can't just sit there and blame the state on saying, oh, they're not doing this. Well, you look at the management areas, they're relatively big. And are there times that they could do a better job? Of course, everybody, can do a better job at things. But at the same time, you can't have the aspect, I've seen this before and I've talked about it before, but, locally it's be like, oh, why are they giving out, 4 deer tags? There's not any out there. But some of those same people are the ones filling all 4 tags because they'll say, well, the next person's going to shoot them, so I might as well. That's such a terrible attitude. You can't do that. And I'm very thankful that, my dad taught me that growing up as far as like, there's areas we just didn't shoot does because there wasn't enough that, my dad felt like we should take any out of the population. And, we were talking about that. Him and I were talking about it. There's some areas that are getting better with population than they were before. And we're like, I'd feel comfortable shooting does in that area, again. And there's enough of a resource that we don't feel like the impact that we're going to have would be negative on that. But it takes looking at that from yourself and self-regulating, not just in media. You don't have to have any social media to be a helpful part in the future of these resources.
Absolutely. And I've come to learn from getting to know people across the country that we get real frustrated with a lot of state agencies on how things are done from the outside looking in, but a lot of these state agencies are severely underfunded and they're understaffed for how many acres, like you said, they have to cover and they have to survey for all of these things. And the best thing you can do instead of griping about it to your buddy or whatever is, donate more to to the funding for the organizations that can do the wildlife studies that they need to do, or you can actually contact, state agencies and stuff like that and give your input in a constructive way of trying to, don't call them up and beat them over the head with it.
And tell them they're a bunch of assholes.
Yeah,
like
no,
that
we ain't trying to do that. That won't get nobody anywhere. But I was just trying to be constructive because it's easy, and I'm guilty of it too. You see things on the internet, you see things in the woods. There used to be a lot of turkeys around here, and there ain't no turkeys now. And boy, I wish they'd drop the limit down. And it's, self-regulate.
Yeah.
Try to call your state agencies. Try to be constructive about it. Like these things, turkeys were extinct 30 years ago, give or take. I could be wrong on that number. Some time ago.
Not extinct.
Yeah, well, they weren't extinct. They were severely close to being that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they were brought back because people wanted to bring them back and did something about it, So there's going to be bell curves. There's going to be ups and downs.
And we have the power to be able to affect that, and that's a positive thing. We do have that ability to be able to do so, and that's And you think about it from that perspective. That there weren't really any turkeys.
Yeah,
it's really not that long ago.
Yeah,
and but again, at the same time, look at the buffalo that we had a negative impact on. So we should learn from that.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah, but there's definitely lots of positives that can be pulled from what we're saying here. It's not a doom and gloom thing. It's just something that I think you and I both really feel passionate about and have thought a lot about and continue to think a lot about. That I realize that sometimes, like even doing this podcast, a lot of times we talk about deer hunting tactics and doing this stuff.
Yep.
That's sexy, and that's what we like to talk about.
Yep.
We all like to talk about it, but at the same time, we have the duties to talk about these things too, and in a way that, because they are important to us, they're just not as sexy to talk about.
Yeah, it's the behind-the-scenes stuff that nobody wants to talk about or face. It's the awkward conversations with yourself and with other people. It's not easy to self-regulate when you only get so much time off from work, or when you only get so many opportunities to go out and do things. It's hard. Like, we're not downplaying any of that. And this is not us sitting here saying, shame on you. Like, we struggle with this too.
Yeah.
Like, this is us, gut checking ourselves on our week. Because every time that we produce something, we're sitting there going, is this, what is this going to do? Like, is this doing good, or is it doing, harm? And it's an everyday thing, and not good or bad. It's just the life we live. And it's exciting that we have that responsibility, because it makes you feel, like you said, like we have the ability to change the way things are, or to protect the way things are. And that's exciting. Yeah,
no, it is. And it's crazy that, we have that responsibility. It's a big one.
Yeah.
To be able to do so. And like, again, one last thing I want to say back on the state agency thing. Like, I think it's super important to give your feedback and give your comments, but again, not in just a complaining, bashing way. Because think about it. If I were to come up to you and say, I didn't like something you were doing with camera work, and I were to approach it with, you're an idiot. How can't you get that right? Why is your shutter speed this? Why is your white balance this?
Yeah.
You're an idiot. Or I could say, hey man, do you maybe think we, can bump this up, or give potential solutions, do something. Maybe you still might not be happy that I'd be given that feedback, but at the same time, you're going to be more receptive to hearing that versus just because you're going to have that fight or flight response of either going to shut down and not want to talk to me, or you're going to, throw something back and
blow it off. Yeah.
And then once emotions get involved, nothing really gets done.
Yeah.
You can't think of things clearly.
100%. No, I totally agree. It's those management positions, like, I'm guilty of it. I definitely have taken them for granted. Like, a lot of those guys, like, they live that life, and it's not necessarily the highest paying job in the world or the most rewarding from a popularity standpoint.
Yeah.
But they're in there day in and day out, and they see it because they love it and they care about it. And we love to go hunt them and stuff like that, and we love it just as much as they do. But like you said, we have to be constructive about it. We can't just let our emotions get the best of us and just start, griping and whining. We got to approach things and try to actually find legitimate, applicable, and realistic solutions to stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes you may not know that, and that's fine to be, just be aware of your approach and how you're delivering the information that you're trying to deliver, I guess.
Yeah, don't go screaming at people on the phone.
Yeah, that don't help anybody.
Yeah.
No, it's yeah, but I think again, it's exciting from the standpoint that we do have that ability to change things and be able to have an impact in that way. And again, I think, not just saying this because I'm in the media realm or you're in the media realm, but there's things that we can do. Like you were talking to me about, like things you're passionate about are telling stories and telling really cool stories. And we were brainstorming ideas for doing films and things that would, someone were to watch that and they feel positive in some way, have a certain emotion, whether they want to go do something that's similar that would help things, or just that they get fulfillment and entertainment out of watching that in a positive way. And from our standpoint, what we do, that's a really cool way of being able to have that impact and do that.
It's super fulfilling, and that's what makes those projects fun and worth all the really hard behind the scene BS that nobody sees, and trying to figure out things that don't work and do work and break down and all of it.
Yeah. Was there anything else you think you want to add to that point there? Or?
No, I mean, on the consumption side, we talked about earlier too, not necessarily from what we put out there standpoint, but from what we take in. We talked about that some.
Yeah.
And I don't have any evidence of it per se or scientific data to back it up, but I think there's some truth to the amount of stuff that we consume, whether from hunting on the hunting content side, but I think it spills over into other areas of life as well. But we consume so much information and stimulus about what we love so much, which is hunting and the pursuit of game, or whether it's managing game or whatever, that I think over time we're training ourselves to be, conditioned to love that immediate success or that immediate reward, and it's a bit numbing to our actual experiences in the woods and out in the field of the fact that, and especially if you talk to your dad, like how many days does he spend actually out there, and how many days does he actually see that deer?
Yeah, a lot to a little.
Yeah, very. But he's still fired up to go out there and do it over and over and over again. And I think that, the way that the algorithms are written now with TikTok and Instagram and the immediate we just see things. We see kill shots. We see successful pictures. We see all these kinds of things immediately without context to the blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting there. That it's not a conscious thing, but I think it's a subconscious conditioning that we ought to be aware of and probably regulate a little bit on how we consume things.
Yeah, so an example too is like how it can negatively impact you if you're having a rough season and you're not seeing many bucks or you're not seeing any turkeys or whatever, and you get done hunting for the day, or maybe you are hunting and you're on your phone and you look and you start seeing like so and so shot a huge buck, so and yes, you're happy for them, but there's always that part in your mind. It's like, man, do I suck? Like, no, it's like you don't. First of all, you don't know. Maybe that person, this is the first buck they got in 3 or 4 years, or you don't know that story or how much work that they put into that, and it's hard. Even myself, that is, I think about it, I'm in it, but at the same time, I still see it. Tough years like I had this year. Now I'm very thankful that I shot a nice buck in West Virginia and a doe, but in Pennsylvania, which is like where my heart is all in there. Like, I put a lot of effort into it, and to not shoot a buck here this year first time in a long time, it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it makes you question a lot of things, and you're like, man, but if you sit back and you think about it and you look at the experiences, like, I'm like, man, I had the best year ever. That literally one little moment could have changed my whole perspective.
Yeah.
And you got to have that you have to have that in mind when you're scrolling and you're seeing all these things, and especially if you're new to hunting too. Like if you're someone that comes into it and you heard about it from, Cam Haines and Joe Rogan talking, and you're like, I want to get into hunting, or I want to, provide my own meat, and you don't do good, but you see everybody else doing good, you start getting down about it, and that's not a good way to measure what it is, because if we just like that aspect, our goal is to kill the animal to be able to do that, but that can't be the only thing you love about doing it.
Yeah.
And that whole pursuit of it. And my dad is that perfect example. You were in his basement. You saw the thousands of sheds, literally, and all the bucks on the wall. And if you were to put how much goes into every single one of those, and you could tell again how much it meant to him, because he knew he could tell you a 20-minute story about every shed that he's found and that buck and going through it and all of those different things. Like, there's so much more that goes into that, and that's where that love of that pursuit and learning to love that process of it is super important, where the consumption standpoint can deflate that a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think if you were to look at the ratios, like, on effort to success, it'd be a horribly low ratio for especially public land whitetail hunting, but it doesn't make it any less rewarding. In fact, it would probably heighten it, because, it's that much more work that goes into something, and it makes it that much more pure and I want to say rewarding again, but I've said that like 10 times, but same thing. And I think social media is an unrealistic just
snapshot
to look at hunting through, because like we said earlier, you're not able to show the whole context to how things hunting. That's why I like long form or really powerful short form stuff, because I try to tie the emotion and the realism of how much it took to get there into the things that we make, because it's the closest thing we can get to putting you there. When we consume things that are just pinnacle, with none of the valleys ever in there, well, then we expect the pinnacle with no valley. And it's not a conscious thought. I mean, it's, whether it's success in business, whether it's, success in whatever, I think that's just how we're conditioned to process things and be used to things.
Yeah, I mean, relationships, whether that's, romantic or friendships or anything, like, you're going to have those peaks and those valleys. And I'm not one to give much advice on a lot of those things, but I feel like you've got to understand that it's not always going to be riding that mountaintop, looking on that ridge out at the sunset. Sometimes you're going to have to dive down to get water 2,000 feet below in the mountains and figure out how to get back up.
Yep. That's what it takes. But that's what makes it worth it too.
Yeah.
I think that's the purity of hunting is in not only the respect of the game that you pursue, the feeding your family with good food, but also it's the blood, sweat, and tears that you were willing to sacrifice out of respect for the animal and in the love of the pursuit and the challenge of besting that animal.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think, Thomas, we got into that pretty good, and man, I feel like there's so much more to be said on it, but I think that from the standpoint of anybody listening to this and the way that we're describing, again, not the doom and gloom side of it, it's just being aware of how you're thinking and how you're going through things. And again, it can be translated to so many different aspects in life, and I really appreciate the fact that you think about that, because it challenges me even hearing you talk about these things of the way I look at it. And I think that helps being around people like that and having these conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the best thing you can do in life is find people that think the way that you want to think and hang around them, go hunting with them.
Yeah. Just go hunting with them.
Go hunting with them.
I love it, dude. So to kind of wrap this up, Thomas, if anybody does want to follow you along on the social medias and, or reach out to you for any work or anything like that, how would someone get a hold of you?
Just Instagram. It's my name backwards. It's just Clements_Thomas. And that's where I'm most active. Most of my portfolio, my website's linked there, and my contact information's there. Holla if you want to do something cool.
Awesome, man.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.